Hello, my name is Isaac Ford, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Gibson RD Artist bass. I'm embarrassed to admit how long it took me to say that intro. RD Artist bass, it really is quite a tongue twister there. I want to start by talking about the controls. We have not only a three-way toggle switch, neck pickup, both pickups, bridge pickup. And then we have individual volume for both pickup, volume for neck, volume for bridge. And this is where it gets a little interesting. We have a bass and treble 2-band EQ. And you'll see the knobs are actually labeled 5 through 0, 0 through 5. Where this bass gets really interesting is this switch here. In the middle is just normal mode, and that's what I used in the demo. However, if you flick it up, you get bright mode. And bright mode just boosts the top end a bit. Now, when we have it all the way down, we get a compression expansion. This is a little interesting. I read that Gibson was trying to limit how many controls were on the bass, so they got a little creative with how this works. When we're in the compression expansion mode, the neck position is just expansion. Which can give you some really interesting sustain. The mid position is a combination of both expansion and compression, where the bridge pickup is just compression. Now, I do have some bad news. The compression circuit on this bass does not work. If you're not familiar with the preamplifier of this bass, there are very few people that know how to work on them and how to fix them, so you're kind of out of luck if something happens to yours. Now, let's talk about the history. How did this bass come to be? So the 70s for Gibson was a very experimental time, especially for their basses. The most favored Gibson basses were made in a small stretch of time, including the Ripper, the Grabber, and the RD series. So the RD series featured two different basses. You have the RD Standard, which has more like a jazz bass style pickups, single coil pickups. The RD Artist is known as kind of the deluxe RD bass. It features active electronics by Moog. In this era, Gibson owned Moog, I believe, and they wanted to create their first active bass guitar. All right, so let's get into the looks of the bass. So the looks for me is like a 10 out of 10. And if you've been on this channel, you know I like crazy looking basses, especially the Thunderbird style. What makes this bass really cool is it has the open book headstock, complemented by the Perloyd Gibson logo, and I think they call this the flying F-hole inlay. The only thing about the looks I don't love, I'm not a huge fan of the black on black pickup pickguard. My jazz bass actually came this way and I switched out the pickguard, and I'm thinking about switching out the pickguard on this. The other thing I don't like is it has a huge route on the back. And it's kind of a shame because this is really beautiful figured maple. This is necessary to include the Moog preamp. And you can see it is huge. So it's necessary to route out that back. And you can see here too, I have the battery exposed. Typically there'd be a little cover here. When I bought the bass, it was just missing. So let's talk about the feel. The neck is very similar to what you'd expect from a 60s P bass. So I'm very comfortable and familiar with this neck. It doesn't have the itty bitty nut width like a Thunderbird. And it also has a very, very thin finish. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The thinner the finish, the better. It seems like guitars, the finish just gets thicker and thicker every year, and it feels more like plastic than an instrument to me. I mean, you can see by the wear on the back of the neck that there is just very, very, very little finish over it to protect it. This is a very big bass. I'm 6 foot, and I think if you're any shorter, you'd probably find this instrument to be pretty uncomfortable. Nirvana's bass player, Novoselic, is known for using one of these later in Nirvana's career. He's 6'7", I think. So, for what that's worth, if you're a smaller player, I would probably encourage you to play something different. However, it does sit like a normal like jazz P bass, so it doesn't feel like I have to stretch way down. Whereas my Sandberg, I'd mentioned, actually did feel like it was offset, so I had to really stretch my arm. The only thing that I personally find uncomfortable about this bass is it is a whopping 13.2 pounds. At least that's what I weighed it as. I'm still in disbelief, but it does feel extremely heavy. It is the heaviest guitar I've ever owned by far. There's pros and cons to it. The big thing is I wouldn't use it for a gig more than an hour. But the good thing is, unlike most Gibson basses, it doesn't have neck dive. Actually, my most balanced bass, second to my headless bass guitar. So much so that you can actually take it off the strap, sit and play with it, and it will stay relatively balanced. And normally a bass will go and shoot down. I am impressed with this bass for that reason. I will say if it was this heavy and it had neck dive, I truthfully would not have bought it. Now the sound, not what I expected. It sounds to me like a thick sounding jazz bass. I've noticed with all maple basses like Music Man's, some Schecters, is that they all have a lot of attack and a pretty quick decay, it seems. Might disagree with that. That's what I hear every time I play one. And so this bass definitely doesn't sound like my jazz bass by any means, but it has that clean, thin sound as opposed to the really wide, thick sound, somewhat muddy from a Thunderbird. Because of the sound of this bass, I've actually been using it mostly for church. I've actually claimed this to be, I dub thee, the best bass for worship I've ever used. It has the perfect amount of width and bottom end with a clean, distinctive mid-range. In my own music, it has a little, I'd say it's a little bland for what I typically like. I'm a big fan of basses with a ton of character, but in gigging context, I think it's a good instrument for sure. What are my overall thoughts on the bass? On a scale of like 1 to 10, it's really good. It's a really good bass. They are really expensive. That's kind of the one thing that does suck about it. I got this one for a pretty darn good deal, so I jumped on it. If you keep your eyes open, you can find them, for a reasonable price. Thanks for watching another bass review on my channel. Be sure to subscribe and check out my other videos.